台湾绝对不能
Taiwan must not become Ukraine, and I will not let Taiwan become the next Ukraine.
台民恳请
I implore the Taiwanese people to give me 4 years. I promise that I will bring 50 years of peace to the Taiwan Strait.
This is my video update from Athens, Greece on this Tuesday morning, August the 29th. Let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with a very depressing article from the BBC, which dropped today, actually a couple of hours ago. And it has the title, "Dying by the Dozens Every Day, Ukraine Losses Climb." Now, this BBC article, it interviews a mortuary worker who goes by the name of Margot. She's 26 years old, and she works at a mortuary on the front lines in Donetsk. And she talks about how she is seeing firsthand a huge rise in dead Ukrainian soldiers. And the article talks about her experience and how she sees things shaping out in this conflict. And the article talks about how the more deaths that occur in this conflict for Ukraine, the harder the Ukrainian stance becomes. And basically, the article says that the Ukraine people in Ukraine are prepared to fight the Russians until the very end. But that's one part of this article. The other part of this article is where the BBC, in a way, admits to a huge number of losses that have been incurred by the Ukraine military because of the catastrophic counteroffensive. And it actually puts some numbers to these losses. So let me read you what the BBC is saying. Whether you believe these numbers or not, that's up to everyone to decide. But the fact that the BBC is talking about such big numbers in Ukraine military losses, I think is pretty important. It's pretty interesting that the BBC, within this article, is actually talking about the big losses that the Ukraine military has suffered in this failed counteroffensive. The first sentence of this article actually starts off like this: "There has been a dramatic rise in Ukraine's number of dead, according to new estimates by unnamed U.S. officials." The BBC article then references a New York Times article where the New York Times quoted U.S. officials as far as the casualties of Ukraine were concerned. The figures remain classified, but U.S. officials quoted by the New York Times recently put the number at 70,000 dead and as many as 120,000 injured. It is a staggering figure from an armed forces estimated at only 500,000 strong. The UN has recorded 9,177 civilian deaths to date. Then the BBC, further down in this article, it comes out with the number of what they believe to be the casualties that have been incurred in the big counteroffensive. As recently as April, leaked estimates from the Pentagon put Ukrainian deaths at the much lower figure of 17,500. The alleged jump to more than 70,000 can be partly explained by the counteroffensive in the south. In its early days, it was especially hard on Ukrainian infantry, worse than Bakhmut. One brigade commander who was fighting there told me, "The city in Donetsk fell to Russia in May in one of the bloodiest battles of the war so far." So, in this article, the BBC is saying that according to U.S. officials interviewed by the New York Times, the casualties for Ukraine were placed at 70,000 dead and 120,000 injured. That is what the New York Times was reporting, and the BBC then comes around and says in April the number of dead was 17,500. This is according to the BBC, according to figures that the Pentagon had estimated. Okay, so this was in April, 2 months before the big counteroffensive launched. The Pentagon was saying that Ukraine had suffered 17,500 dead. Now U.S. officials, as interviewed by the New York Times, are saying that the number of dead is 70,000. So the BBC comes to the conclusion that from 17,500 to 70,000, this huge increase in dead soldiers, in Ukraine military casualties, can be explained via the failure of the big counteroffensive, which actually falls in line with what the Russian Ministry of Defense said a couple of weeks ago when they claimed that from June 4th up until the 1st of August, Ukraine had suffered 43,500 dead, killed in action from the big counteroffensive. So BBC is saying in April, the Pentagon said 17,500 KIA. Now they're saying 70,000. The Russian Ministry of Defense said 43,500. I think you start to understand the scale of this counteroffensive disaster. What a catastrophe this big counteroffensive has turned out to be for the Zelensky regime, and that is if you believe the Pentagon's number of 17,500 Ukrainian KIA in April. I think that number is very, very low, but it doesn't matter. I think what matters is the increase, which is what the BBC is pointing out, which they're pointing out a 50,000 plus increase in KIA from April up until today, and they're saying that most of it is due to the counteroffensive, and then you have the Russian Ministry of Defense with their claim that 43,500 were killed on the front lines from the counteroffensive from the Ukraine military side, and I think we understand that this has been a massive disaster for the Zelensky regime. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about a Bild article that came out the other day, and Bild claims that Scholz and Macron, they got on the phone together and they talked about their experiences in dealing with Russian President Putin. When Scholz called Putin, when Macron called Putin, Scholz and Macron got on the phone and they exchanged notes as to what Putin told each of them. And Bild claims that Macron and Scholz were shocked at the fact that when each of them individually spoke to the Russian president, Putin seemed to be unfazed by the EU sanctions. Actually, he didn't even bring up the EU sanctions. What he was focused on was trying to find a solution to the conflict in Ukraine and trying to get to some sort of a ceasefire, a negotiation and a ceasefire in Ukraine. And they were puzzled as to, both Scholz and Macron were puzzled as to why Putin was not whining and crying and complaining about EU sanctions. So Scholz said this, according to Bild, and this is from from a translation from the German publication Bild. Scholz, speaking to Macron, said, "Something bothers me more than the conversation with Putin. Putin does not complain about all the sanctions. I don't know if he did that in the conversation with you, but he did not address the sanctions at all." And Macron replied, "Not with me either." they're wondering how come Putin wasn't whining and complaining and crying and begging Scholz and Macron to remove the sanctions. That's what they're shocked about. It really tells you a lot as to what these EU leaders, what these collective West EU member state leaders think of themselves and think about the power that they feel they hold over the entire world, over Russia and over the entire world. They think that they are indeed the masters of the universe, and they thought that when they would call Putin, that Putin would be like, Scholz, look, please, I beg you, Olaf, remove the sanctions. Please, I beg you. I'll do whatever you want, Olaf. I'll do whatever you want, Olaf, if you would just remove the sanctions. Olaf, you're the man. You are king, Olaf. You beat me. You beat us. Take Russia. Take all our resources, Olaf. You win. That's what Olaf was expecting, and that's what Macron was expecting as well. You know, he was expecting Putin to tell Macron, you are Napoleon. You are Jupiter, Macron. You are Jupiter. You've done what Napoleon couldn't. You have broken Russia with your EU sanctions. Now, please, 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 Emmanuel Macron, please, 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 pretty please, remove the sanctions. It's killing me, man. They're killing me, the sanctions. You got to remove them. And they're talking to each other, and they're like, he didn't even mention it. He didn't mention anything about the sanctions. Why didn't he mention the sanctions? Why should he mention the sanctions, Macron and Olaf? Why should he? When Putin fully understands that the sanctions are just going to hurt the European Union, why would he bring them up? This conversation, this article from Bild leads me to believe that Russia and Putin, they had this thing game planned out. Now, I think that they were surprised as to how well Russia did weather the sanctions storm, how well it responded to an unprecedented economic attack. I think they knew that Russia would make it, but I think they're even surprised as to how well Russia fought off the economic sanctions war that the collective West placed on it. But no doubt that Putin and his team, they felt confident that they would come out okay from the sanctions that were placed on them. That's why he didn't bring it up. He's like, why should I bring it up? I'm going to be just fine. Russia's going to be just fine because we did our homework. We did our planning. You guys, on the other hand, you guys are screwed. That's what Putin should have said. I'm not going to talk about sanctions, but Olaf, Macron, you guys are going to be in big, big trouble. That's what you get for listening to Biden and Newland and Blinken. You fools. Look at this coffee cup. Nice coffee cup, huh? Summer vibe, summer feel to it. Anyway, that was an interesting article from Bild. These guys are so full of themselves, Macron and Scholz. They really are full of themselves. So Macron, yesterday, since we're on the subject with Macron, he said that France has given its blessing to ECOWAS to intervene in Niger, all for democracy. Macron is very concerned about democracy in Niger, not uranium, not uranium or France's position in Africa as an imperialist, colonialist power. He's concerned about democracy. And Macron, in a statement, a public statement, he gave his blessing to ECOWAS for military action in Niger. So there you have it. France is the country that is pushing for conflict in Africa. They're the ones that are pushing for ECOWAS to start a war in West Africa. That's Macron for you. Euromaidan Press, they put out an interesting tweet. In their 50s, 60s, and beyond, these Ukrainian soldiers defy their advanced age by carrying out combat missions with dedication. Calmly and carefully, they work to dismantle and destroy the enemy. We will stand and win, they said. Territorial Defense Forces of Armed Forces of Ukraine. Now, I look at this tweet, I look at the photo, and I look at the tweet, and Euromaidan Press is trying to make it seem like this is a good thing, like this is a positive, that you have men in their 50s, 60s, and beyond fighting in this conflict. But I look at this photo and I'm shocked and saddened. And I think this photo and this tweet from Euromaidan Press confirms the BBC article that I talked about in my opening segment, which is that Ukraine is suffering catastrophic, horrendous losses to the point where we have men in their 50s and 60s and 70s. I talked about a 71-year-old tank crew member training in Germany yesterday. The fact that we're seeing this more often in Ukraine is a sign that things are not going well. And here's a tweet from Lord Bibo where he references a Bild article. And the Bild article has the title, Ukraine is planning a new mobilization. Once again, the German publication Bild. Ukraine is planning a new mobilization. And Lord Bibo says, in quotes, Ukraine needs new soldiers. So Bild is reporting that Ukraine is going to undergo another mobilization. It's planning a new mobilization. I think it now is very clear to everyone that come September, October, Ukraine, the Zelensky regime, they need to mobilize or else they're going to collapse. Their military is going to collapse. This is due to the horrendous losses that they have incurred in the big counteroffensive. So it's now being accepted that Ukraine will have to mobilize. The exact number of the mobilization is still unknown. Obviously, no one knows what that number is going to be. The German publication Welt just last week was talking about the need to mobilize 3 million people. I've heard other publications and analysts come out with a number of 1 million. I've heard other analysts put out a number that's much lower than the 1 million. But whatever that mobilization number ends up being, the reality is that the Zelensky regime and the Ukraine military, they have to mobilize. If they don't mobilize, they will collapse. They will not be able to continue to fight Russia and to fight this conflict as a proxy and on behalf of the Biden administration. That is the tragedy to all of this. As we have a corruption scandal focused on Ukraine playing out in the United States, we have the Zelensky regime and the Ukraine military fighting a proxy war with Russia on behalf of the very people involved in the very corruption that was taking place in Ukraine. It makes your head spin, to be quite honest. But the main point in all of this is that Ukraine has to undergo another mobilization. This is not a mobilization that is needed in order to provide rest or relief to troops that have been fighting in this conflict for a certain amount of time. It's not a mobilization that is needed in order to shore up gains that have been made. It's none of that. This is a mobilization that Ukraine has to undertake in order to replenish the KIAs that it has incurred and the casualties that it has incurred over the past 3 months since it launched this disastrous and failed big spring-summer counteroffensive. So the Greek publication known as ODYSEE, which translates to flight. I'm not very familiar with this Greek publication, but they put out an article yesterday, which is gaining quite a lot of attention and traction, not only here in Greece, but across the interwebs. And they claim, this publication claims that Germany has approached the Greek government with a tank deal. And the Olaf Scholz government is telling the government of Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis that Germany will give Greece 100 Leopard 1A5 tanks, older Leopard tanks, but modernized. Older but modernized Leopard 1A5 tanks, 100 of them, if Greece gives 100 old Leopard 1A5 tanks to Ukraine. Now, the catch is that the Greek Leopard 1A5 tanks, many of them are sitting in a warehouse and are not combat ready. They have not been modernized. They're not combat ready. The Greek military is not using these Leopard tanks, cannot use these Leopard tanks. They're just kind of sitting in a warehouse collecting dust. What Germany is offering Greece is they're saying, we'll give you the same Leopard 1A5 tanks, but these 100 Leopard 1A5 tanks are modernized and they're ready for battle. You take these 100 Leopard 1A5 tanks, you give over your 100 Leopard 1A5 tanks to Ukraine, and we're all good. But the condition that Germany is placing on Greece is that Greece has to modernize, or at least has to get these Leopard 1A5 tanks to a condition where they are battle ready. Once they do that, they hand those tanks over to Ukraine, 100 of them. Germany gives 100 Leopard 1A5 tanks to Greece, and all is good. This is the scheme that Germany, according to this publication, is proposing to Greece. And the interesting part about this scheme is that the Leopard 1A5 tanks, from what I understand, that Germany wants to hand over to Greece are not coming from German tank inventories, but these are tanks that, and I might get this a little bit wrong, but these are tanks that belonged to the Italian military and are now being held in Switzerland, and Switzerland has decided that they will not release these tanks to Ukraine, and so they're just sitting there. And Germany has thought up this scheme where they say, you know what? There's 100 modernized Leopard 1A5 tanks in Switzerland that belong to Italy, but because Switzerland cannot deliver these 1A5 tanks to Ukraine as we are requesting, because the Swiss government has voted against it, let's create a scheme where these tanks go to Greece, and Greece gets 100 Leopard 1A5 tanks fully modernized, but Greece has to get their very old Leopard 1A5 tanks combat ready, and then they hand them to Ukraine. And that's how Germany has thought up to, that's the way they've thought up to solve this tank problem for Ukraine. Anyway, my head is spinning from this three-party deal that Germany has thought up. But, Germany is, they're trying to come up with, that's the trolley bus that makes that noise. Germany, they're thinking of creative ways to get those Leopard tanks to the Zelensky regime. Old Leopard tanks, but Leopard tanks. That's That's Germany's big concern, and those Leopard tanks are going to be destroyed by the Russian military. There is no doubt about that. So let's, should we do one more story before I get into a couple of clown worlds? Let's do a pre-clown world. How about this story from Podolyak, where Podolyak, Zelensky's BFF, he says that the collective West has given Ukraine the green light to destroy everything Russian in occupied territory. Okay, including Crimea. Okay, well, more statements from the Zelensky regime, which claim that the collective West does support, has been supporting attacks on Russian territory. Of course, the collective West will argue that they don't consider Crimea or the new territories to be part of the Russian Federation, so they don't consider their support of Ukraine to hit these areas as an attack on Russian territory. That's going to be the argument that they make, including Crimea. The Russian Federation, they're going to look at this as a provocation from the collective West. But really, what's going on here, I believe, when Podolyak comes out with these statements, I think he's just trying to provoke Russia into doing something that is not in Russia's best interest with regards to the way it's fighting this conflict. He's trying to get Russia to perhaps strike out at the collective West or do something towards the collective West that maybe can draw in NATO or the collective West into this conflict. So Podolyak is coming out with a statement saying, you know, who's telling us to send drones into Crimea? Well, it's the UK. So Russia hit the UK and strike at them, and then Podolyak will get an excuse to somehow draw NATO into the Ukraine conflict. Russia's not going to bite. They're not going to bite at these types of attempts or statements from Podolyak to try and bait them into doing something that is uncharacteristic of the way they've been fighting the war, and which would draw in some sort of NATO forces into this conflict. So that's all that's going on here. When you hear Podolyak come out with these statements where he says that the collective West is encouraging us to send drones into Crimea, what Podolyak is trying to do, he's trying to get Russia to react so that he could then get NATO into this conflict. Because at this point in time, the only thing that could possibly save the Zelensky regime, well, two things. The only two things that could possibly save the Zelensky regime and probably save Ukraine is some sort of NATO intervention. And I don't even know if that saves the Zelensky regime or Ukraine, NATO getting involved in this conflict, or some sort of regime change in Russia, or a palace intrigue in the Kremlin. And they tried that with Prigozhin and Wagner. It didn't work, and so I don't see that happening either. So this is just another desperate move from Zelensky's BFF Podolyak. Anyway, let me do a pre-clown world before I get into my clown world. And this pre-clown world is once again courtesy of the Estonian Prime Minister, Kaja Kallas. Kaja Kallas. She said yesterday that she will not resign. She said it again. She will not resign because of this scandal with her husband, where it has been revealed that her husband had all kinds of business going on with Russia, and he was making money doing business with Russia, while Kaja Kallas was telling the people of Estonia, the people of the European Union, the people of the world, she was telling them that you have to cancel Russia and you can't have any contact with Russia. You can definitely not do business with Russia. That was Kaja Kallas, and it was found out that her husband was doing business with Russia. But Kaja Kallas' excuse is that she had no idea what business her husband was up to. And she came out with a statement, and she said this, and I quote, "The opposition will definitely come out with a motion of no confidence, in which case I will appear before the Riigikogu, Estonian legislature, to give an account. I will certainly appear before the relevant committees, Callas told the state broadcaster ERR on Monday morning. In the same interview, however, Callas said she would not attend the joint session of the State Budget Control and the Anti-Corruption Select Committees scheduled for Tuesday. According to the Prime Minister, her husband's business activities in Russia did not affect the Estonian budget, so the committee had no jurisdiction. Callas told ERR she would like to know what exactly they are charging me with and look forward to the opportunity to put the matter to rest with a public session of the parliament and a vote. So if I'm reading this correctly, she's daring the opposition to put forward a no confidence motion, a no confidence vote. And she feels like she will be vindicated if this takes place. And she says that she'll appear in front of the Estonian legislature, but not in front of a joint session of the, I guess, of the parliament, of the State Budget Control and Anti-Corruption Select Committees. She won't appear in front of committees which are, I guess, being charged with investigating this alleged corruption on the part of her husband. So that is her latest statement. She will not resign. She will appear in front of legislature, but not in front of any type of investigative committees. And she is telling the opposition parties, I dare you, I double dare you, I triple super duper double dare you to put this up to a vote of no confidence. And she's like, I will win. I will win that vote and I will remain as Prime Minister of Estonia. And then she asked the question, what exactly are they charging me with? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I did nothing wrong. Nothing. I'm as clean as can be. I was just making money off of Russia. Well, my husband was making money off of business dealings with Russia. What's wrong with that? What is wrong with that? As elites, we're allowed to conduct business with Russia. Everybody else, now you're not allowed to conduct business with Russia. You can't even fly direct to Russia. We've cut off the airspace, so there's no flights to Russia. There's no business to Russia. There's no media from Russia. But my husband, he can make money from Russia. What's wrong with that? What is wrong with that? At the end of the day, Kaja Kallas was doing her job. She was looking after the best interests of her husband, herself, and Ukraine. Estonia, not so much. But that's her statement. Anyway, that's my pre-clown world. 3 videos in a row where I've talked about Kaja Kallas. I never thought I would be doing that, that's for sure. But it's an interesting story because it highlights the hypocrisy, the elitism, right? I talked about Scholz and Macron and how they were just shocked at the fact that Putin was not begging them for sanctions relief. Here you see how the Prime Minister of Estonia views the world, views her actions, her family's actions. It's okay for me, it's okay for my husband to do business. There's nothing wrong with that. But anyone else who does business with Russia, well, you're going to get fined, you're going to get canceled, you may not be able to open up a bank account. Look at what they did to Nigel Farage. You may even eventually go to prison. Who knows? But we can make money from business dealings with Russia. You, the people, can't. Anyway, let's do a clown world and we'll wrap this up. And this is from the Daily Mail. The sounds of Greece, everybody. The sounds of Athens. Let's see here. One sec. All right, everyone. Watch my bag. I'm going to throw this coffee out. Just watch my bag. Make sure. No one steals anything. All right, so the Daily Mail, they put out an article with the title, Exclusive, Eminem sends Vivek Ramaswamy a cease and desist letter demanding he stop rapping his music on the campaign trail. Eminem. Eminem, whatever. He is suffering from a terrible case of TDS. He really is. He's been suffering from TDS for a while now. Very talented artist, very talented rapper, but he's got a bad case of TDS. So he wants Vivek to stop rapping his song. Last week, Vivek was lip syncing, was karaokeing. is that a real word? He was lip syncing Eminem's. No, he wasn't even lip syncing. He was karaokeing Eminem's song "Lose Yourself," and a lot of people got a good laugh from it. Actually, this was in Iowa, and it was a pretty funny, a pretty funny scene to see. Vivek, presidential hopeful, rapping "Lose Yourself" from Eminem. But Eminem did not see it that way. He got upset at the fact that a Republican presidential candidate dared to sing his song at a karaoke event. And so he wants Eminem wants Vivek to stop. To stop, a cease and desist. No more singing my songs, according to Eminem. Anyway, that's the video. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, and Rockfin. And go to the Duran shop. 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. Take care.